Taco, I'm going to talk about MSCI. I think a lot of people know what it is, but don't know really what it is. And you're going to talk about the Olympics. So why don't you start?
Yes, the Olympics started last Friday, and of course, for all people that like sports, it's a great event. But it's also a very big economic event. And for Paris, as an example, the costs for the total event of the Olympics are around $9.7 billion. So it's quite a event, and the costs are half of it are taken by the local and national governments. Well, I think they don't do that just for fun, so I think everyone can imagine that there are some obvious benefits to have this kind of events in your country or in your region. Well, the positive public relation effect, we are speaking about the Olympics, so I mean there's a lot of in the news, everyone is speaking about it, so you can imagine that is a positive thing if you have that in your country. And of course the tourism and everything related to the visitors, that is a booming business. For the investments in the infrastructure, of course, for the short term, that is also very positive. For the long term, also historically speaking, this doesn't have to be always an advantage. Of course, it's nice to have big stadia and everything that you build for the event, but later you also have the maintenance costs, and can actually be a problem. So as a conclusion, the short-term effects are always positive for such an event, but the long-term effects, Tokyo, for example, was very positive, but Brazil, in the end, was not that positive for the long term. Well, the main sponsor for the beer, that's Corona Zero, this event, and that's part of InBev. It's a brand of InBev at this moment. InBev tomorrow will present their quarterly figures of the second quarter, the 1st of August, today it's the 31st. And expected is that the volumes fell 0.6%, but the growth, the revenue growth will be actually 3%. Very important to see what's happening this week. Earlier, Heineken, the competitor in the business, they lost around 10% after not meeting the expectations for the first 6 months of the year. So let's see what happens tomorrow with InBev. I'm not so sure. Of course, the Olympic effect, that will be later. The amounts paid, that's of course already now taken. But let's see what they will do tomorrow.
Exactly. Okay, let's talk a little bit about MSCI. I think when you look for ETFs, most of the time you will see MSCI in the name of the ETF. One of the most famous indexes or ETFs is the iShares MSCI World, for instance, and that explains already quite a lot. iShares is from BlackRock, and BlackRock is basically paying MSCI for following their MSCI World Index. So what is MSCI doing? MSCI stands for Morgan Stanley Capital International, and it was, as the name says it itself, it was Morgan Stanley owned, but in 2009 it became an independent company with a listing on the NASDAQ. So I asked you already before in the Dutch vlog how many indexes are followed, so I'm not going to ask you again, but they make 280,000 different indices. And why is an indices so important? Because it basically gives you the ability to show, to read the performance of an index, and with that, for instance, a country or a region or an industry or a sector. So they make those indices, and they make money out of selling the licenses to follow their indices to, for instance, iShares. So if we want to make a Hugo ETF and we want to follow the world, we go to MSCI and say, okay, we want to make our Hugo ETF, we have to pay them a fee. And those fees, if we want to think about it, how much is that? Is approximately 0.03 to 0.04% per year. What are the extra costs that we have to think about? Well, approximately, let's say for the listing on the market itself, you need between $5,000 and $10,000. So we want a listing on a more known exchange like the NASDAQ, for instance, 10,000. But it depends. Each index or each exchange has its own cost for that. There are also free exchanges like, for instance, BATS in Germany. But why are they so important? Morgan Stanley is so important because they can have a major impact on, for instance, if they have an MSCI Frontier ETF, and within that Frontier ETF, they put a country like, I don't know, Paraguay. and then all of a sudden they upgrade Paraguay to emerging markets, automatically that country, the stocks that are listed on the Paraguayan stock exchange are then included into the emerging markets ETF, which lifts much more volume, which carries much more volume, and ultimately the price of those stocks will be impacted also on the other side. If you have a country that goes, for instance, Venezuela goes down, the Venezuelan stock exchange goes from emerging to frontier, then that will have also automatically a big impact on the stocks there. You can buy MSCI index ETFs very easily through the trading platform Hugo. You log in and you type in MSCI, you can find the stock itself, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. And the ETFs, they can be found very easily. The stock itself, as I said, has a listing on the Nasdaq. Market cap of approximately $50 billion US dollars. Price at this moment is $546 US dollars. The target price lies at 590. The price was approximately 640 when the year started. And why is the price going down so much with $100? Approximately mainly due to Credit Suisse and UBS. Credit Suisse, of course, was paying for a lot of licenses for their own ETFs, for their own products. They went together with UBS. A lot of those licenses were not necessary anymore, and that had a big impact on the figures of MSCI. That is behind them now, and they think mainly, and that's an important element that I want to mention, is they're very much focusing on ESG. ESG is going to be much more important the next coming years. You will see that also when you log into platforms, the ESG scoring for stocks, etc. And they're focusing fully on bringing out ESG-friendly ETFs. It stands for environmental, social, and governance criteria, basically, that are implemented into the management of the ETF. So it's an interesting company. I think I didn't know so much about them. I'm going to be honest with you. Of course, I knew MSCI. I knew what it was. It was an index reference, but it's something that I think is good to know.
I think a lot of people, if they make like the benchmark, someone says, I want to invest in this, this sector or this region, but someone needs to do it.
Make that benchmark,
600,
exactly. You hit
who
the
are
spot.
the 600?
It is basically the benchmark, what they create, and like I said, they have a very pivotal role in the stock market. They can influence individual stocks. They can even influence countries or sectors. So and I think that is good to know when you're at a birthday. Say I'm having an MSCI, that you can talk about what is MSCI. I want to round off with something funny. In the past, in our office, we had all these typical Dutch blue tiles, and I picked one up because it's really warm here in the south of Spain. And this one is: an annual account is like a bikini. What she hides is interesting. What she shows is interesting, but what she hides is essential. And that's a quote from Burton Malkiel. I'm going to show you the tile here that you see that I'm not making this up. We will come up with this every week now. We will show you a little quote, a stock market quote. Wish you all the best with your investments. Enjoy the Olympics.
Yes.
And speak to you next week. Give us your thumb as usual.